My name is Steve, and I am the front-end architect at Temporal. We're a company that does workflows you can use for distributed systems to make sure that everything runs as planned, basically taking all of the hard parts out of distributed systems, asynchronous processes, and all that kind of stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about Figma today. This is Figma for developers. What that basically means is, kind of from the perspective of a developer, right? Like a lot of times if you're trying to learn Figma and you're an engineer, by default, like there's a lot of, it's designers talking to designers, right? This is a safe space where we can make jokes about like prototypal inheritance in JavaScript and relate it to Figma, and it's gonna be great. So what are we gonna do in this course? We're gonna learn a lot about creating prototypes and user interfaces in Figma. There's a lot of reasons why you might do this, right? There is the fact of the matter is like side projects and that you might want to build. It's a lot easier if you have some of the principles of design. Sometimes, if you work at a startup, like I did 10 months ago before we had a designer on the team, you need to do a certain amount of the design yourself because nobody else is going to do it for you. And wouldn't it be nice if you knew what you're doing, right? And then the kind of final piece that I kind of want to poke on a little bit here is knowing how to use the tools not only helps it make your life easier as you're implementing the designs. If you have an amazing designer on your team, they're going to hand you a Figma at one point. And they're going to do everything they can for that developer handoff, right? But then like it'd be nice if you were like on the receiving end, like ready and familiar with the tool as well. And the other thing is that we're going to see is knowing how to use Figma, not only for yourself to build UIs, but also like if you're working with a designer who's using Figma, helps you become like an equal partner there, right? Where it's like, hey, actually, like I know what I need to do in this code base, whether it's React or Svelte or Vue or Angular or what have you. Here are some ways that we can work together, and maybe you can even show your designer a few things. We're going to touch a lot of design concepts, right? And there's definitely in that kind of relationship with the designer piece, this idea of like a design system, right? Maybe you're using something like using Tailwind or Chakra or Material UI, or maybe at your company you're kind of building your own. A lot of those are kind of a joint venture between design and engineering, where kind of being on the same page of both the how they're designed in Figma and then also how you go about implementing those designs is incredibly helpful and powerful. It basically makes everyone's life easier. We're going to touch a lot of design concepts, but like for a full-on just design principles, there are 2 other front-end masters courses that you should check out, because I will say this right now, like, yes, I've been a front-end engineer for longer than I care to admit. I have a certain amount of experience working with some really great designers. That said, having worked with a bunch of really great designers, I understand there's a difference between, my specialty as an engineer and architect versus a designer as well. So just kind of keeping that in mind, this is kind of for developers by developers as well, right? And so we talked a little bit about who is this for. I would also, definitely developers, and then also like designers who work with developers, I think, like getting that other perspective of how to like put together a design system, how to structure a UI prototype, how to have reusable components that are easy to kind of like work your way around for the engineer. I think as a designer, that's super helpful as well. All right, so what do you need? Basically, all you need is a Figma account and ideally a web browser. Whether it's one you downloaded or the one that came with your computer, either one should be fine. There's some kind of Internet Explorer joke hiding in there somewhere that I can't find. But the major point, there is a Figma desktop application. It's an Electron app. It's wrapping the web app. It's mostly the same, right? Do you need it? You do not need it. If you want it, you are free to download it. I will be using it today as well. Sometimes it's nice to just be able to command tab in between 2 different apps, one being your browser and the other one being the Figma desktop application. But there's nothing that we're going to do today that you need the desktop app for that you could not use the web application for as well. There is a template file that you can kind of take a look at, and I'll show it to you right here. Let's bring it over. You can basically go ahead to this link and hit duplicate, and then you will get your own copy that you can work in. It has all the course materials, everything we go through today, and some stuff that I'm not going to get to today as well, just kind of extra material there as well. You can kind of play around and do the exercises there.
How easy is it to go from Photoshop to something like Figma?
That depends, right? Figma will import like Sketch and a lot of things like that. It all depends. If it is a flat JPEG file, it's doable, right? One of the things we'll look at today is I took this screenshot of the Front-End Masters course page, which, yeah, when I had this great idea, I did not realize that I was on the page, but I also wasn't going to take the time to remove myself from the page because I'm an egomaniac. So I took this a screenshot and re-implemented it by hand. It took me like 2 or 3 hours. It wasn't fun, but it wasn't like a Herculean effort either, right? It was something I did kind of while I was doing other stuff during the course of the day as well. Mark, get another question.
My designer is struggling to shift. She won't use Storybook, but loves Photoshop. So can you make a case for Figma?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things we're going to see as we start to use Figma is that by default, and we'll kind of go into this more in depth as we work through the material, we'll see that there's a lot of stuff that kind of like, it's kind of meant for building web interfaces, right? And so for stuff about like if you grab anything and you hold down Option or Alt, you can kind of see the distances between anything. You can also go into this Inspect tab and start to see like at least some inspiration for the CSS that you might write. Now, as we go through and we look at this, we'll see that I use the word inspiration like very deliberatively, right? Like, will it generate all the CSS that you need perfect that you can maintain forever? It will not, right? If that was the case, we would all be unemployed. So, but it will at least kind of give you some, like here, it'll set up like the general like Flexbox pieces so you don't have to go that same CSS tricks blog post that I've been going to for almost a decade now to remember the difference between justify content and align items, right? So you can get some of that kind of starter pieces as well. So it's definitely, I think there's a few pieces, right? The idea that it is live and collaborative, which means like, as you can kind of see, as your designer is making changes, you can see it as well versus like, do I have the most recent version of the Photoshop file and stuff along those lines. So we're going to cover, how to use Figma. That seems important. We're going to kind of think about exactly like what the implications are for us actually having to implement some of these designs as we go along. And we're going to talk about the foundation of building a design system. One does not build a design system in a day. One does not build a design system while also learning a tool for building a design system, all encompassing, but we will kind of touch that topic and kind of use it as an exemplar as we learn our way around the tool.